So that's the assignment we're going to do. Let's open it up. L, coding from flowcharts. And I didn't put a PDF, I just put the Word doc, because if you try to copy code from inside a PDF, cut and paste code from a PDF, then usually it loses the indentation. And I gave you template code to start the program off. And it's got a little definition for each method we're going to write. So it'll be easier to fill in the code based on what we see in the flowchart. All right, let's talk about what the flowchart does. It's a long flowchart. It's got a lot of different pieces in it, but each little oval here indicates a function. So we're going to have a main function. And it's got, when we define this, it's going to say int main and then brace, and then it's going to have some code. Then we have some other functions, one called menu. What menu does is it displays a list of options. I strongly recommend that you open up your own copy of the flowchart rather than trying to read it up here. So for example, this menu, all it does is display two options. A, convert pounds to kilograms, or Q, quit. Then there's another one called ask. Now this wasn't strictly necessary in this flowchart, and I should have removed it. But what it does is it tells the user to enter a number, and then it uses CIN to get that number, and then it returns it. The real important function, besides the main and the menu, is the one that's called pounds to kilograms. What pounds to kilograms does is it asks the user for a number of pounds using the ask method, ask function. Then it calculates the kilograms. And roughly the number of kilograms is equal to pounds divided by 2.2. It's actually like 2.20036, but that's close enough to 2.2. And then it prints out the kilograms. And then it returns. So it'll go back up here. Now there's a big loop here in the middle. This is going to be probably the most interesting thing to implement. It's not really that bad. But what it does is we're inside a while loop that's looping as long as our choice is not Q, which stands for quit. We call the menu function. The menu function displays the function, let the user type in a choice, and then it returns back to here. So the real point of this, besides getting a chance to look at flowcharts again if you haven't taken 1113, and if you have and are sick of flowcharts, I apologize, is the idea of modularization. Each function could be considered a module, and we've broken the problem down into these functions so that our main application is not 100 or 200 lines long. So we ask for the menu choice. Hopefully they type in an A or a Q, and it says if choice is equal to A, then call the pounds to kilograms function. Else, if choice is not equal to Q, because we only have two choices, we print sorry, invalid choice. And if they did type Q, then when it loops back up here to the while loop, again, choice is now equal to Q, so that's false and it fails all the way out to the bottom where it prints done. So hopefully you can see what this does. It's a conversion program where you enter the number of pounds, it prints out the number of kilograms, and it does so via a little menu that says A, convert pounds, or Q, quit. And it loops over and over and over until you choose quit. Now why is there a menu if there are only two choices? Well, because you could add other conversions. You could do grams to to ounces and liters to quarts and stuff like that. Okay, so like I said, there's a template here. I'm just going to copy all that text. And then when I create a new application, I'm going to paste that template code in there. The reason I gave you the template code is because it defines all the functions for you, and so you can just go and add the code. And also it creates prototypes for the functions, which is not strictly necessary if you define the functions in the correct order. But what if you didn't? What if you put, the ask function beneath the function that uses the ask function? So, new project, inclass L, or conversion, or whatever you want to call the project. No precompiled headers, no security checks. wipe out everything in here and replace with our template code. Now I'm going to try to compile and run it just to make sure that there aren't any syntax errors in the template code. That'd be a drag. So start without debugging. It builds. It's not going to do anything, but at least we shouldn't see any errors. Yeah, press any key to continue. Okay, down at the bottom of the flowchart are some hints. So if you scroll down to the bottom of the flowchart, there are hints. One is I say put the main function at the bottom of your file. That's not strictly necessary since the other functions are defined as prototypes. But do implement the functions in this order. Menu, ask, pounds to kilogram, and then main. And the reason I do that, or I suggest that, is because you can implement the menu function and then you can test it. You can implement the ask function and then you test it. But if you do it in another order, you know, pounds to kilogram requires ask to be implemented. So you couldn't test pounds to kilogram without already having implemented ask. Another comment, note that the syntax shown in the flowchart may not always be C++. In this case, it's pretty close. But you may be given a flowchart that's written in a generic language rather than a very specific C++ language. For example, statements other than if, while, and function definitions all need to end in a semicolon. If I forgot to put a semicolon in the flowchart, don't forget to put it in your code. You still have to have a semicolon after your C-in statements and your C-out statements and stuff like that. If parentheses are not shown in an if or a while statement, you have to go ahead and add them. There are some places where you see the words true or false breaking off of if statements. You know, if choice is equal to A, then true, call pounds to kilograms. Those are not C++ keywords. It's just indicating the logic. So that if this if statement is true, it calls that function. All statements that have if or while or function definitions are code blocks. And what do you have to make a code block work? You have to have the curly braces. The curly braces are not shown in the code, but in general, any time that one of my flowcharts veers off to the right like that, you're going to need a curly brace. So inside the while loop, there's going to be a curly brace. Inside the if statement, there's going to be a curly brace. So that'll kind of help. I try to make my flowcharts look as much like the code as possible. Okay, let's off to the races. What did it suggest that we implement first? Menu. Okay, so here's the menu flowchart. What does it do? Well, we have to have the header for menu, but that's already in the template. We declare a string called choice, and then using cout, we display two choices. A to convert, Q to quit. And then we read some input into that choice variable, and we return that variable. All right, we can do that. Let me bang this on the side over here and see if I can get two things on the screen at the same time. My Christmas wish list is for us to have 2 screens, 2 monitors for every computer, and for me to have 2 projectors. What do you think the chances of that are?
I have a spare monitor you can use, but it's ancient.
Somewhere between zip and null are going to be the 2 projector idea. Okay, so let's see. Opening back up my code. Here's the menu in my template. Is where it says replace me with good code. That's what I'm going to do. What's the first line of the string flowchart other than that header, that blue header? Well, I could read it myself, but yeah, string choice is equal to empty string or space, you know, something that's not Q. Actually, it doesn't matter what it is. We had to declare it before we could use CIN to send some data to it. Now we have some cout statements. Display our menu. I didn't use the abbreviation LBS in this program, which is a correct abbreviation for pounds, because if you name a variable LB or LBS, and I project it up here, then invariably somebody's going to type 1B, and you can't name a variable starting with a number. So if you want to call your variables LB or whatever, that's totally cool. So A, convert pounds to kilograms. Q, quit. And similarly, to make it easy to read, I put a space before the /n, but that's absolutely not required in your program. After we've displayed our menu, we use CIN to read into the choice variable. And the last line should no longer be return blank. We need to replace that with a valid return statement, which is return choice. And if we were really awesome programmers, we would add comments. What does this function do? Displays a list of options and returns the selection. You know, something like that. I'm not going to do that though, because that makes the scrolling up and down even more necessary. Okay, now I want to test my menu. So go down to the main function in the template, and before the return statement, just call menu. So before that returns 0, once you're done typing in the menu function, go down to main, and then invoke call the menu function, menu parentheses in parentheses semicolon, and then run it. Make sure that it works without syntax errors. I'm going to test every function that we write that way so that I don't get too far into the code before I realize, you know, it's riddled with syntax errors. All right, so I run it, it displays a menu, convert kilograms, I type in a choice. Now that's all the function does, is display a menu and let you type something. So there's really not a lot to test, but at least I proved that there weren't any syntax errors in it. Who might be getting syntax errors that they need help correcting?
You remember I thought I found a new way today? I tested it while I was waiting for class, and it seems to work so far. Cool. Which is the exact same thing that I said on every single other way that didn't work. But this way works so far. This is a really great sound effect. If I kidnapped you, I'd make it very valuable. Huh? Nothing. I wonder what it would feel like if I made your.
All right, I'm going to go on to the second function. If I get too far ahead of you, then let me know and I can print it out. As a matter of fact, I'll be adding this code to the Word document even as I go, so I can print it out. Okay. Alrighty, now for ask. The ask one is really short, and it's singularly useless in C++ context because it could be replaced with a single CIN statement. But in the other language that I did this flowchart for, it was a good idea, Python, because you have to convert to the correct data type before you return it. So the first thing ask does is declare a float variable. Then it tells the user to enter a number. Then it uses CIN to read that number in. And then it returns that variable. Then I'm going to go down to main and insert a call to ask as well to test out the syntax. So underneath the call to menu, I'm going to invoke ask. And eventually I'm going to delete all these test calls when I actually implement main. But I'm just proving that each function that I write doesn't have any syntax errors. All right, so far so good. I'm going to go ahead and keep doing these because the code in the flowchart until we get to main is pretty much a one-to-one correspondence with what you're going to type in. No whispering. Just because I want to hear too. Unless you're saying bad things about me.
Oh, sorry, I was still trying to figure out if you were talking to me or not. I haven't been getting enough sleep. I accidentally zoomed out really far because I was holding down the control key while I scrolled,
Oh, yeah.
and then it shrunk really tiny like John's itty bitty crap on his screen. And so I said, John, I need you to read this for me, I'm retarded. That's what happened. I might have left out a few things about blackjack and hookers, but I mean, that's the gist of the story.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Names have been changed to protect the guilty.
Exactly. Mostly the ones that are still in my bathroom.
All right, so I added pounds to kilogram. I'm going to add an invocation to that function in main. So I'm going to add pounds to kilogram in parentheses, and run it. And I'm testing all three functions now, menu, ask, and pounds. Still, you know, it's not really doing much, but it's proving that the syntax works. Okay, before I implement main, I want to make sure that everybody's got the other three functions implemented. There are menu, ask, and pounds.
Please excuse Stanton from coming to school today. He has an infectious disease. We will most assuredly try to touch all of the other students.
Anybody
and
getting
save
mystery
their
errors?
status. Sorry, what? I have 5 lines left for it.
All right, now for main. I'm going to delete the stuff I already put in main and replace it with what I see on the flowchart. Okay, so here's something that I hadn't already implemented in the other ones, or shown being implemented, the while loop. You know, we've done this in class, but how do I code this while loop? Well, I just put the while statement here, and then as the subordinate code, the code in the code block, where it says true, I just start from there. And everything that's in that line is all part of that code block. Till you get to that little circle. That circle is just a meaningless indicator showing that all the lines of execution rejoin there. It's not an actual code. Same with the if statements. You know, you type the if statement, and then since it's jutting off to the right, use braces afterwards. Alrighty. If by chance you've already gotten this done because you're a faster typer than me, add a second option to convert from kilograms to pounds. And to convert from kilograms to pounds, you multiply by 2.2 rather than divide by 2.2. If you don't want to do that, that's okay. But if you're sitting there bored and tempted to go check out Tumblr or something, then do that instead.
I had a girlfriend that got kicked out of a school for images she shared on her Tumblr account.
Oh, that is a drag. I mean, as long as she wasn't showing them in class, then that's totally unfair.
Nope, she was showing me.
Yeah. Yeah, in Utah, there was an instructor who was disciplined because she was a bodybuilder, and there were pictures of her, in bodybuilding competitions.
That's Utah.
Yeah, that's Utah.
They kicked a guy out of school, BYU, for wearing extremely short shorts to a dance competition. BYU. I thought it was hilarious. He claimed not to be gay, but I'm pretty sure so that he can get kicked out of school for being gay. Which they will do there. Sorry, I'm too politically incorrect for this class.
And then after my while statement, after the closing brace, is where this code that's way down here at the bottom, see outdone, belongs. All right. Correct. To go from kilograms to pounds, instead of divide 2.2, it's multiply 2.2. All right, I have build errors. No, I do not wish to run. That's a stupid option. Your program's broken. You want to run it anyways? Yeah, why not? Oh. Everywhere I have the word float, you should probably change it to double to get rid of some warnings. You don't have to do that. They're just warnings.
Did you say double?
Yeah, change the floats to doubles. Now what's my error? Okay. I forgot to make my main function return a 0 or whatever. That was my error. So just as a test value, 22 pounds should be 10 kilograms. So when you run it, you can type in 22 pounds, and it should say 10 kilograms. 0 pounds ought to be 0 kilograms. And then test the other options by making sure, even if you type in garbage at the menu, like T rather than A or Q, it says sorry, invalid choice, and then that Q succeeds, just so that you're testing every path through the program. Alrighty, so modifying mine to support kilogram to pounds. The function looks almost identical to pounds to kilograms, except you're multiplying by 2.2. Then modify the menu to match. New option, maybe B. B colon. And then down in main, if we get a B, we actually need to invoke kilogram to pounds. Alright guys, I'd expected this to actually last a lot longer than it took.
It put your email in my spam folder. It sent me an email on D2L saying that I might have gotten an email in my spam folder. It was.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Have you been trying to sell Mary Kay makeup?
I have.
Thank you for this code.
Sure. So, going to submit my code to the Dropbox. This is assignment L.
So an int's data size is also exactly 1 byte usually? Or its data space, I should say.
Okay, pardon me?
An int is also exactly 1 byte,
No, an int is usually 32 bits.
32 bits, oh, so 4
So it's 4 bytes, right.
Thank you.
The character is the only one in modern versions of C. You're correct, old versions of C it was 1. And then later, a short was 1, while an int was 2. But now a short is 2 and an int is 4. So
If I reassign the CH variable to a short, then that'll give it just a plain old numeric value then that's exactly the same data space as the character?
right, yeah.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So, in this inclass,
Uh-huh.
why did you add prototype?
To show us how they work.
Right.
Yeah, that's primarily it. But
prototypes in,
at first, I wasn't going to add the actual methods to the template, to the actual functions.
Okay.
In which case the prototypes would be useful.
if you put them below the main. Yeah,
Right.
okay. But why is main a prototype?
There's no reason at all to prototype main.
Main.h.
I was feeling dizzy or, I don't know, hadn't eaten.
The worst case of asynchronous programming ever. Main